Turning our attention to the Indo-Pacific, there's a renewed focus on how allies in our region respond to the ongoing tensions with Taiwan and China. Regular incursions by Chinese fighter jets into Taiwanese airspace have flared concerns of potential military conflict. At their virtual summit this week, China's President Xi Jinping warned the US president not to play with fire by encouraging Taiwan's independence. Meanwhile, an editorial in the Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece, the Global Times, warned Australian troops would face a nightmare if they became involved. It comes after former Prime Minister Paul Keating spoke at the National Press Club earlier this month. He believes that even if things do escalate, Australia should stay out of it.
Taiwan is not a vital Australian interest, you know. We have no alliance with Taipei, none. There's no document you can find. We do not recognise it as a sovereign state. We are committed to ANZUS for an attack on US forces, but we are not committed under ANZUS to an attack by US forces, which means Australia should not be drawn, in my view, into a military engagement over Taiwan, US-sponsored or otherwise.
Joining me now is Japan's ambassador to Australia, Yamagami Shingo. Ambassador, thanks for your time. How does Japan reflect on the flashpoint of Taiwan? Is there a lot of concern in Japan that the situation might erupt?
Well, thank you, Kieran, for having me. There is no question that we are deeply concerned of the situation across the Taiwan Strait. In fact, we oppose any unilateral attempt, coercive action to challenge the status quo and increase tension in the East China Sea. In fact, Australia and Japan came up with a strong statement in this past June in the form of 2+2 joint statement. For the first time in history, importance of peace and stability over the Taiwan Strait was highlighted. So hopefully, through direct dialogue between parties concerned, the issue will be resolved peacefully.
Do you welcome the talks between President Biden and President Xi in a bid to take some of the heat out of the tensions in that region?
Well, of course, as ambassador, to Australia, I'm not necessarily privy to, all the details of the discussions, that took place between Americans and Chinese. But that said, I think this is a, good step forward because it is, important to keep open the channels of communication.
Paul Keating's comments, I played those comments before our discussion, Ambassador. Paul Keating says Taiwan is not a vital interest to Australia. Do you agree?
To be frank with you, Kieran, I'm not, in a position to make judgment as to, what constitutes, vital interest of Australia. I think it's up to Australians to decide. But that said, Taiwan is a robust democracy of more than 23 million people. Established market economy makes an indispensable part of supply chain, so important to the Indo-Pacific region. And Australia and Japan are working together to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific. In this context, Taiwan makes a very, very important part of our region. And in addition to that, economically speaking, I understand that three biggest destination countries for Australia's cargo shipment are in Northeast Asia, i.e. Japan, China, South Korea, and the 5 of the 10 busiest ports in the world are in that region as well. So, based upon these facts, I think it's up to Australia to make a judgment.
Is Taiwan a vital interest to Japan?
Well, East China Sea is very, very important, to Japan. So not only the peace and the stability access, across the Taiwan Strait, but also the situation surrounding Japanese Senkaku Islands are vitally, important to Japan. And Taiwan, is a precious friend of Japan, sharing the basic values and strategic interest we have a very close people-to-people exchange. So, as I said, hopefully this issue across the Taiwan Strait will be resolved peacefully through direct dialogues.
If the United States were to not get involved in a Taiwan crisis, what would Japan do in that scenario?
Well, I'd like to refrain, from making any comment on, hypothetical question. And but I think any country which has a vital stake in this region, whether United States, Australia, Japan, are fully aware of the importance of peace and stability around Taiwan.
Your predecessor, former Japanese ambassador to Australia, Sumio Kosaka, has urged Australia and Japan to join forces to fast-track Taiwan's application to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Would you like to see that happen? Do you agree with your predecessor?
Well, I have been a trade diplomat for so many years, and I know the historical, significance of CPTPP, as it's understood by my predecessor, Ambassador Kosaka. And also, I would like to point out that, CPTPP is a high standard agreement, high standard in terms of trade liberalization and rules making. In this context, one needs to understand that unfair trade practices and trade coercion are not incompatible with the rules set by CPTPP. So whether any, aspirant country or aspirant party, China, Taiwan, is up to the requirements set by CPTPP, I think, it has to be closely examined. But as Minister Tihan repeatedly, stated, Trade Minister Tihan was very, very right when he, spoke out the importance of track record of compliance with trade rules.
So would you say Taiwan is better placed than China for entry into that agreement?
Well, you and I know Taiwan is an advanced market economy, and Taiwan's track record is known to everybody. Taiwan has been a responsible member of both WTO, World Trade Organization, and APEC. So as the former Minister Motegi stated in public, Japan welcomes the application made by our friends in Taiwan.